an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Children of Divinity, Book 2, Chapters 17 and 18. In these chapters, somebody on the team is snuffed out. And it's like simultaneously, it was so unexpected, but also a little expected because I'm really sorry, Heather, but I kind of spoiled myself by accident. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you so much to Heather for commissioning this episode, but also, Heather, I'm really, really sorry. So, this is what happened. I opened my book on the Kindle, and apparently, in preparation for today, I had already marked where I had to stop reading, and it opened to the spot where I was supposed to stop reading, namely at the beginning of chapter 19. So I began reading 19, and only like two sentences in, it says something like, everybody was very subdued in the wake of Lilly's death. And I was like, what? This is the wrong spot. I felt so bad. At the same time, it like added so much tension once I went back and started reading, because now I knew what was coming, but also it felt like it wasn't real the whole time. Do you know what I mean? So like I think if I were sitting here right now, not having read the beginning of the next chapter, I would definitely think Lilly was actually not dead. I am not even sure that she is dead. Everybody's just behaving as if she's definitely dead. And I gotta assume that she really is. But there's a lot of things that could be happening here. Look, I'm gonna, maybe I really should just back up. But I just want to say, oftentimes having something spoiled for you can like kind of ruin something or make it that you're constantly looking for it or whatever. And I will say this is not one of those times. I think partially because it's not like super far ahead. It's one thing to be spoiled about something that happens in a book that you haven't even started yet, or you just started. But I spoiled myself minutes before I was going to finally actually get to the part where she does die. So I feel like in that respect, it sort of wound up working well. I'm just so sorry, guys, if you can hear these dogs. I'm sorry. So I just want to assure you, Heather, despite me foolishly fucking spoiling myself, I don't feel like it ruined the experience, and her death still somehow came as a shock. And again, I'm saying death with like an asterisk because it's possible she's not actually dead. I just feel like probably she is. I don't see how else we have that explosion. It just seems like that's not likely a thing that you could just cause by faking it somehow. It seems like that was a legit death. I don't know. So, okay. I'm going to back up. We're going to talk about chapter 17. We start off in this cafe, the Cafe Hana. Is this the place where Lyndon and Spears met up also? Is this the same place? I couldn't remember if it was called the same thing or not. It doesn't matter, but I was just like, this feels like it's ringing a bell. And we have Ryan and Douglas on a date with Chance and Reggie. And, that was a hotel where they met. Oh, okay. My bad. So they're all enjoying their sushi and having a like chill conversation about how nice this restaurant is, how good the sushi is, how much Jill eats when she comes because she's got that super high metabolism, so she can just like fucking put it away. And then we have this moment with like Douglas saying something about how much he feels like he can count on Jordan, and Ryan being interested because she doesn't actually know what it is, like how good Jordan is at her job. The way he says it is, Mother Douglas always told me never date a woman who could accidentally kill you in bed. She's really that good? Ryan questioned. Her tone was more curious than anything. I've never seen her do much more than throttle a bully. That was back when we were in school. She did put it to him, though. They called him Galen the Git for the rest of the year. Honestly, Git is such a good insult. I really like it. It's one of those that I feel like it's mild enough that it doesn't feel like straight up offensive. Although, of course, if you were called that, you would take offense because that's what they intend. But you know what I mean? And it's also general enough that it covers any kind of like fucking behavior. So it's like, for some reason, I don't feel like in the English that we use in America, when we say that guy's a jerk, I feel like that brings to mind a certain kind of maliciousness or something to him. Git feels just so, he just sucks. And it's not even like because he's trying to be a dick. He just sucks. Like, it's unintentional, but worst. And granted, this guy does specifically, if he was a bully, he clearly was being malicious. But yeah, I just have always enjoyed the insult Git. It's fun. So he starts answering her and telling her, you know, she's amazing at combat. I probably wouldn't be fucking sitting here if she weren't with us a couple of different times. And Reggie interrupts and says, you lot promised no work talk. We have to behave ourselves. And then Reggie is like, so what we should be talking about is, what do you think about artificially awakening people? And I was just like, this feels really loaded, Reggie. What are you doing? And we get a conversation here that basically boils down to the eternal question whether or not mankind is mostly good or mostly not. And I gotta tell y'all, I would have had a different response to this 10 years ago, but today it's different. It just doesn't hit the same anymore. Pandemic 2022. I don't think this would work well. I understand everybody's arguments here. I truly do. And I respect them. And I'm not even totally certain Reggie is wrong. I just don't have the overall kind of faith that she does. For me, being like, maybe more people would do good, that's something that I could say and feel okay with it in a theoretical. But it's very different to like say, I believe that most people would do good, than it is to like, you know, pull out a syringe and jab everybody and just be like, I'm confident enough that more people will do good than bad, that I'm actually willing to administer this and begin the thing, the experiment, basically, right now. No siree, Bob. Like, the thing about these abilities is that every time anybody brings up what a person could do with a given ability, Reggie is like, yeah, but then if there's somebody there that can put that fire out with their mind, or if there's somebody out that can stop somebody from doing such a thing. And I'm like, Reggie, you are presupposing that there will be the exact opposite power at any given location whenever something goes down, which is just, that's not a thing to ever assume. And it's clear all these powers don't exactly like have the same proportional levels of effectiveness. And what I mean by that is, we've got Lily walking next to Jill later on. They're downtown having fun, and all of a sudden, fucking Aftermath shows up. Lily, in an instant, melts the street. Aftermath replies in kind, and they set a woman on fire and give her second-degree burns. And they probably could cause a lot more horrific injuries with the heat they're throwing back and forth. Jill heals the one woman who had second-degree burns and pours sweat and nearly passes out by the time she has healed this woman. One person. So even if you've got somebody on scene, Reggie, who can do a thing to heal people or stop a thing, it is not necessarily going to be able to, like, deal with the level of destruction some of these folks are able to dish out. It's just, Jill, what she can do is amazing, but it's certainly not like she can just lay hands, heal somebody, and move on to the next person and handle a bunch of, casualties, collateral damage, and make it so that none of that actually was a problem. It takes a lot for her to do this stuff. It's a real, struggle, and she's only just figuring it out, too. She hadn't been doing this sort of thing before very much, and it's a power that she's, working out. So that's the other thing for me, is, when you awaken somebody, are they even going to know right away what their ability is? Because we have Lily, who almost killed everybody in her house and on the block by accident. She did not know she was awakened, and she went off like a tiny little nuclear bomb because she didn't know what she could do and was not in control of it. So if you just go ahead and inject a bunch of people and then stand back and go, okay, what's your power? I don't know that you will be aware of that right away. I don't know that they will be aware of that right away. And that just feels like we're asking for a lot of horrific accidents, And that's the thing that makes me the saddest, is that it could be plenty of people who don't really intend harm. It goes off poorly. And then what happens? If you're Lily, let's say her dad happened to be involved with a branch of the military that knew about awakened people and was ready to step in as soon as shit went down and got her to a facility with other people who understood her and put her to use training and figuring out a way to channel her ability in an effective and productive way. That's the literal best case scenario. It does not get more perfect than that for somebody in her position. If you're just a fucking regular kid whose parent is not part of the military, who is living in an apartment building, and it doesn't even have to be a kid. Let's say somebody early 20s. You get awakened. You don't know what's going on. Something happens. Maybe there's a home invasion, or, any number of things. It could even be a bad dream. And you do what Lily did, where you basically go incandescent and you take out an entire apartment building or city block, hundreds of people, potentially thousands, depending on the size of the city. Are you going to wait around for somebody to come and retrieve you and help you figure out how to handle your power? Or are you going to fucking panic and be on the run and probably wind up joined up with a bad crew because you don't want to get caught for this horrific thing that you did that will follow you the rest of your life, that haunts you and you'll never get over? I'm just saying, there's just a lot of assumptions about the overall situation. And maybe they would have a control where you get awakened and you're not put back out into the world right away, or you get awakened and they're able to monitor you, and they've figured out a way to sort of mitigate whatever begins to happen physiologically to stop a catastrophe of some kind. But we don't have any of that in place right now. Nobody's really even brought any of that up yet. And so for me, the like overall, whether people are mostly good or mostly bad, that's not even quite relevant right now. Really what we need to be asking ourselves is what we were talking about in the last section, where somebody is like, well, who would be able to get themselves awakened? And somebody is like, well, probably rich people. Reggie doesn't address that at all here, and nobody brings that up. And I was a little bit bummed about it, because that to me is really, that's the heart of the issue. Reggie keeps bringing up these examples of like, well, what about Hurricane Katrina? If we had a bunch of people who had like superhuman strength, imagine all of the great things that could be done. And they bring up people who were like looting or raping because they knew that the police were completely in chaos and that nobody was going to stop them. And I just want to set that aside even, because again, we're getting down to the like, are people fundamentally good or bad? Wait. How about if we've got a bunch of people with superhuman strength, and we just had this like massive hurricane? Okay, maybe these people would like to help and do things, but do they still have to like go to work? Is capitalism still a thing? You know, because like this is what we're running into with a pandemic. People are supposed to be staying home if they're showing symptoms, and people cannot do that because there isn't paid time off. They don't have health insurance. They aren't able to do the things that would allow them to be a responsible member of society and keep this thing from spreading. So granted, in Hurricane Katrina, probably most people's jobs were fucking like leveled, but not everything or everybody. And if we are going to be living in the society that we have set up where capitalism rules and people can't miss work, the assumption that people who have these powers are going to be able to like step in and assist with various like, you know, disasters or humanitarian aid situations is also pre-assuming that those people don't have to go be an accountant for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Like, people, are you going to pay them to bring their powers in and do some good? Because I don't know, you know, this whole thing about the way that we have set up our entire society has allegedly been to improve lives. We created electricity and, you know, automation in order to allegedly make things safer and cleaner and easier, make it so that we were, you know, moving ahead with medicine so that we save lives. And then we slapped giant fucking price tags on all of it. And all these things that were allegedly to make our lives better have been put out of reach of 80% of the population. And we can't, like, all of these sort of, I hate to use like the idealism as a pejorative, but these concepts of how we were going to progress as a society once we figured out how to do X, Y, Z, it has been repeatedly proven that all of these things are going to be monetized, and they aren't going to be given freely to make the world in general better. They're going to be sold. They are going to be profit machines. So I just can't imagine that that isn't what happens with awakening. The only reason that that might not happen is because of Spears' own personal agenda. The fact that he wants to create an army for himself. If that weren't the case, I don't, like, this would absolutely not be something that a regular person was offered anyway. And then now you've got people who are in massively powerful positions with God knows what kinds of abilities. You know, we've got Reggie sitting right here. She can read minds. Can you imagine a person who is either like in politics someplace really high up on the food chain, or somebody who is maybe somebody who's like just a fucking gangster and extorts people and blackmails them. Having that kind of power, because those are the people who would be able to afford to get awakened, it's just a fucking nightmare. Like, I just don't, everything that Reggie is presenting only works if her exact scenario is what happens. And it's almost guaranteed that that isn't how it's going to go. And I just really think that overall, I have been as guilty as anyone in underestimating capitalism's effect on how human beings respond to given situations. Capitalism has poisoned everything to such a degree that even our internal monologues are based on it in a lot of ways. And we judge ourselves for not being productive because we have this judgment about what that means. So I just feel that her altruistic idea of how this would all be put to use, how there would be enough to balance it out, it just presupposes that people who like are in service positions at a bank, when some guy comes in and is about to use his ability to rob the bank, that this like random teller would be able to do anything. No, the chances are this guy who comes in is somebody who's already got power and knows nobody can do shit. And none of the tellers are going to have been awakened because they're making $12 an hour max. And this guy can just take what he wants. And that's the new thing. And now they have to create entire new security systems in order to protect against people who have these abilities, or they have to like hire awakened security guards, which then creates a weird thing, which like, well, maybe they can be paid off, or maybe they don't have the right ability. Like, you know, it's just Reggie. I totally get what you're trying to say. And in a perfect world where things were doled out evenly and equally, maybe, I'm not even like totally willing to get on board even then, but maybe in the current world in which we live, absolutely fucking not. Absolutely fucking not. We have already seen what just Aftermath can do. There's a whole team of good guys working to try and stop this dude, and they have been unable. I mean, I feel like that should really say it all. You know, we've got one dude with Tretiak who his blood can transform a bunch of other people so he can create a fucking team. One person being bad enough is like, that can outweigh a group clearly in the way that it's leveraged over them. So that's what I have to say about that. I just had to talk about it because, you know, I don't think I fully understood how much everything is like, sort of how insidious capitalism is in getting into every corner of our lives and ruining the playing field and making it so that even things that were intended to help everybody don't get to do that. And I just recorded a 10-year anniversary celebration episode with Rashawn for Unspoiled, and we were talking about my like optimism at Trump not getting elected way back when, and how even at the time she was like thinking to herself, Natasha, you are underestimating the power of angry white people. You do not get it. And I didn't. I just didn't. And that's sort of what I'm realizing about capitalism now that we're in the pandemic and we're seeing the havoc being wreaked because our economy just can't take it because everything is built on exploiting labor. That's the fucking foundation of it all. So when you begin to start chipping away at that, it's like a house of cards. But I don't really think I ever stopped to think about how that would work. So there's just, you know, there's a lot about the systems in place in our lives and our societies that I believe a lot of us have a misplaced faith in simply because they're still functioning. And because they function, we think they work. And those are not the same thing. So that's the end of that rant. And I'm sorry to get super socialist / communist on you all. But I mean, you know why you're here. And I'm just going to do that. I can't help it. So now let's move on to what is going on with Jill and Lillly. This is all the more devastating to me because of, and I think like this is kind of on purpose, right? I'm going to turn down this light. Forgive me. I'm just so bright right now. We have this moment, and I will say this. And Heather, please, this is not meant to be offensive because I have a caveat here. A thing that happens a lot in fiction is right before a character is going to be killed, we get a little bit extra time with them in order to drum up some sympathy or concern overall, like we care about them more when we know them better. And I'm saying this not because this feels cheap to me, because it doesn't. And again, even having spoiled myself and knowing that's probably what was being set up here, was us getting to spend a little bit of extra time with her so we could see what happened. It still didn't feel that way. The way this is done really badly, if anybody wants examples of like just general bad writing, go watch The Walking Dead. Anywhere past like season 4. And you are just going to see how many times, I mean, season 2 actually, I think is one of the worst offenders with this. There'll be a character that's like totally a side character. Barely even remember the name of this person. They've hardly shown up at all. And then you get an episode that's like 30 straight minutes of their life story. And it's a dead giveaway. You know immediately this person's dying later this episode because we have never had to give a shit about them before. And now all of a sudden they're all we're doing. Yeah, that's a fucking red flag. They're about to die. So their deaths would always feel so cheap because it was like, we're just going to set this up so that all of a sudden you care. And now we're going to like just punch you in the gut with it. And it didn't work after a while. Like the first 2 times, maybe. And then you start to get into like, 5 and 8 and 12 and you just see it coming and it's bullshit. So Heather's in the chat, for real, The Walking Dead became so bad. Truly. I wound up quitting. I was covering it first by myself and then Owen joined me when I first moved down here. And we finally got to a particular season in which a particular thing happens and I fucking rage quit. I was like, I can't do this anymore. This is so pitiful. And I have never regretted it. I can't believe that shit was like, is it still airing? I feel like it's still airing. It's bonkers. That show really needed to be shot in the head itself. So anyway, that said, I don't feel that here. It's done. We're not like, going into Lilly's major backstory. We're not having flashbacks that are overwrought or these melodramatic moments of like, here's what she went through. We got to see what she went through before already. Like that was enough. And it's just interesting to be in Jill's POV here, talking to Lilly and seeing how Lilly has such pain in her voice when she mentions like the day that she awakened and how certain things changed for her, that even Jill, who is nosy AF, steps back and is like, okay, maybe I won't bring this up actually. I would normally ask a follow-up because I want to fucking know, and I do still want to know, but she sounds like that's a really tender topic, so maybe I won't. And like Jill is not too sensitive about that sort of thing really, and can be a little bit oblivious, I think. So the fact that it's enough that she stops with Lilly, I'm like, okay, it had to be kind of bad, oh my god, Heather says it's in its final season now. I can't believe it's still like, Rick disappeared at one point, right? He like gets on a fucking, spoilers for The Walking Dead, by the way, but it's not because nobody cares. Rick gets on a fucking, I think, helicopter and just flies away into the sunset and you never see him again. At one point, if I remember correctly, I heard about it secondhand. I did not watch the episode. And as far as I know, he has not reappeared. I'm wondering if they're going to like bring him back for the last like 2 episodes. And it turns out he found a place where they're rebuilding a society and he's taking everybody there. I don't know, but I don't like it. Whatever it is, I guarantee that I don't like it. So Jill doesn't always recognize boundaries. That is a good way to say that. That's a diplomatic way to say it too, because when people who don't respect boundaries aren't always necessarily shitty people. They're people who oftentimes do mean well. And that's when it's the hardest to like uphold your own boundaries. When you know that somebody means well and they're trying to help in the way that they understand how to do that. But I am very strict with my personal boundaries, and I get extremely knee-jerky when it feels like somebody's pushing up against them and not like... Sometimes they're not really reading the room, or they're not reading my body language, or they're not reading between the lines. But I'm pretty good at just being pretty direct and being like, I do not want to talk about that. And not everybody even listens to the explicit statement of how you don't want to talk about something. And I start to get rather impatient with it. So yeah, I don't like, whenever I say they have no respect for boundaries, when I say that, I usually mean that in a really insulting way, but saying they don't always recognize boundaries, I think, is kinder, because saying that like they don't have respect implies they recognize them, but they just don't want to like, you know, honor that. But recognizing them is the first step there. And I shouldn't assume anybody can with given people, because I am more direct than most people I've met. And even I can't get folks to back down sometimes. So, but yeah, so Jill is like, there is this moment where she tells Lily about her ability. And Lily, she wasn't supposed to tell anybody. And basically is like, you can't tell Jordan, by the way. And I love, she says this, and both of them look over their shoulder because they're like, is she right there? Is she right there? And they bond a little bit over the fact that Jordan is just up their asses all the time. And I loved this so much. And I love that, like, it's done with love. You know, they both like Jordan, and they recognize, like, she's a badass and she's doing what she thinks is right for both of us. But goddamn, it does get very fucking exhausting. And that is real. That is how it is to love a person, you know? So they bond over that. And then Lily is like, so what do I look like? And Jill stops and takes a look at her and is like, what is going on? Holy shit. And she comes up out of it, and Lily is like, so did I look okay? Is anything wrong? And Jill is like, you know what? I was so distracted by how fucking bonkers your insides are. I didn't actually check and see if everything was okay, so hold on. And she goes back in, so to speak. And everything about how Lily's body works is like a fucking foreign language. And Jill is determined to try and make herself understand. But it is not like she, like working with the types of bodies that she has been so far. Shit is, her entire metabolism is different. Whereas Jill has to eat a ton because she burns through calories so quickly with what she does. Lily metabolizes like the ambient heat and like gamma rays and shit that are coming off of the planet itself and the sun and whatever. She doesn't need to eat as much, which actually works out pretty well. If they were able to like be friends and go out to eat and Lily wasn't hungry, she could just order anyway just to keep up appearances. And then Jill would just fucking eat her dinner. You know, it's like when you're friends with somebody who really hates the pickle that comes with their sandwiches all the time, but you fucking love pickles. And it's just wonderful because now you get 2 pickles. It's the best. But sadly, that will never be. So she finally manages to like put together, I think she's okay. And then all of a sudden there's Lily going, are you all right? And she's like on the ground. It was like she passed out, and she wasn't unconscious, but it was more like her mind and her ability were so engaged that her own body could not sustain the output of energy it took to keep her standing at the same time as it sustained the output of energy for what she was trying to determine with Lily. So her body was like, all right, well, if you're determined to keep doing that, I guess we'll shut this thing down. And they just like dropped her on the ground. And she comes out of it and manages to like recover pretty quickly because she's able to heal, you know. And they decide that they are going to go to Starbucks and get some giant sugary drinks and pastries because she is so hungry after doing that. And they spend the day shopping, and they're like, you know, talking over the things they've looked at and whether they're going to go back and get stuff, which I really liked, Heather. I have to assume that this is something that your husband asked you about, but I don't know. Maybe he just knows that this is how shopping works. Maybe he's a shopper. Most dudes aren't really. So I'm going off of a stereotype here. But I'm not going to buy it right now. And then you're walking down the street with your friend 4 stores later and they're going, are you going to buy it? That's a very real thing. This felt extremely familiar to me and I appreciated it. So they're in the midst of this, and all of a sudden, here comes Aftermath. And Lilly's immediate response is a Hadouken, essentially. And she sends him flying. And if I expected him to be actually hurt, I would be disappointed. I didn't really. But I was just saying in another recording I did, how I have like a weird kink with villains where even if a villain, like their approval shouldn't matter, when they tell the good guy, wow, actually, you're pretty good at this, I really love it. I love a villain who's like impressed, because it's so often that they're just like, is that the best you can do? Oh my God, you're pitiful. And it's just like, whatever. But when they're like, oh, damn, I just love it. It's my favorite. So he comes up out of this and is just like, word, I barely got my shield up in time. That was rad. And then they start to go to town. And like I said, the fucking street is melting. Cars are bursting into flames. This woman's clothes just spontaneously ignite and she starts to get these burns. And Jill, in what she later thinks was a bad decision, decides that she can't really help in any of this in a major way. She can't do anything for Lilly. You know, this guy's got an ability that what she can do bears no weight here. So she goes and handles this woman who has been horrifically burned. And when Jill begins to heal her, she experiences the pain of the burn and is just like, holy shit, that is horrific. Like, I find it really interesting, the concept of her suffering the feeling of the injury. How many doctors would be better at their jobs? I swear to God. Doctors just, it's an occupational hazard to a degree that you have to set aside your empathy to do your job sometimes. But so many people, it goes too far and they become like weirdly mistrustful and they go in with an idea of what's going on and don't really listen. It's very frustrating. So all that to say about how Jill later thinks it's a bad decision, to circle back around and say, personally, I think that was the best possible decision she could have made, and that it was responsible, appropriate, and empathetic, and compassionate. There is nothing Jill could have done. She keeps saying something about how, like, I should have helped Lilly, and I genuinely wanted Jordan to say, how would you have done that? What would you have done? Literally what? I'm not trying to be a dick, but I want you to explain to me what you think could have made a difference here. Because there is literally no way Jill is accomplishing anything here except getting herself fucking ignited. The only question is, how much Aftermath would avoid trying to hurt Jill if he could? Because he tries later to negotiate with the team and is focusing specifically on wanting to talk to Jordan. Maybe he tries to avoid hurting Jill because he needs Jordan on his side and he knows that's not going to work. I don't really know if he is even aware that Jill's Jordan's sister. I'm truly not sure. And the thing that I find sort of worrying about this scenario, this may be nothing, but the whole thing is that Jill isn't supposed to have told Lilly that she has these abilities, And then we have her passing out on the street in front of everybody after connecting with Lilly's body. Okay, it might just look like she passed out. Maybe that's nothing. But then, in front of a bunch of people, she heals this woman's second-degree burns. It is really possible that now Aftermath knows Jill has powers. I'm sure, based on the fact that he's working with Spears, and that they know Jordan's abilities are probably genetic, they have probably made their assumptions that Jill has abilities, but I just find it super worrying that it's out there in this way, uncontrolled right now. You know, I don't know if it'll come back and bite her at all. Even if it does, I don't think she did the wrong thing. I would like to go on the record as saying I think that was a fair risk to take, all things considered. She still did the right thing, but I'm worried about it. So basically what happens here is that Lilly and Aftermath like ascend into the fucking stratosphere and fucking disappear. And when we open the next chapter, they have no idea where Lilly is. And they're looking for like her heat signature and shit. And because I had already spoiled myself, I thought they might find her body out in this search. Because it really seemed like she was holding her own in such a way. I didn't expect him to be able to capture her. I thought it was going to be like to the death or she gets away. I didn't think that he'd be able to, you know, and of course, if she gets captured, I'm going to assume that there's a big rescue mission. Guess what? That's not how that goes at all. So we have this, you know, contact, this basically like extremely dramatic Zoom meeting where Aftermath chimes in and is like, I've got her. I have this collar that's loaded with some drugs that will cause her to basically implode. It will be agonizing. Her power will sort of be turned in on itself and she will explode. And if you don't meet me in half an hour, that's what's going to happen. And in the midst of all this, Aftermath and McIntyre are having a whole other thing happen. This is very interesting to me because Aftermath seems like he may have a point. Don't get me wrong, he's a piece of shit. He is absolutely a monster. I am not on his side. But McIntyre is not being honest with everybody, and he seems to think he's just gonna get away with that. Bucko, where's Reggie? We need Reggie up in here. We need to have her check this guy out. Just do a little riffle through the old mental Rolodex because something is up. And we have known something was up. We've known this, right? But I don't believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Heather, were we aware about him leaking the Dunleavy's position? Did we know that he had done that? I remember there was some weirdness around the Dunleavy in general, but I didn't think, okay, she says no. Okay. Cause I was like, I hope I didn't just like forget that. So there's a couple of things here. First of all, Jordan notes, like, she's really trying to maintain a weird level of like decorum when she's talking to Aftermath and like a professional demeanor, which actually works. Like, he seems to genuinely appreciate it, which I just find so funny. And then we have this thing where McIntyre says, because of course Aftermath has to goad him about his son. And McIntyre says, don't you speak of him. He trusted you and you murdered him, murdered his wife, his children. You killed them all in cold blood for no reason. And this is the first time that we see Aftermath really get fucking emotional about a thing. And he says, everything has a reason. It's one of the fundamental laws of existence, cause and effect. In this case, your son was the cause and death was the effect. Ethan's son killed Mary because she agreed with me. She thought that people like us shouldn't have to hide from our own governments. She was tired of living in fear of your director and of her own father, of her own husband. She was terrified Ethan would take her children away and hide them in some secret prison or train them to continue his personal crusade. The children's deaths were unfortunate, nothing but collateral damage when your son lost control of his temper and turned his powers on his wife. I avenged them when I killed your master's precious Liam and when I killed his loyal hound Portsmouth. Cause and effect. Word? So, Mary was Ethan's daughter-in-law? I'm assuming that's when he says Mary. So, what Aftermath is saying is basically there was some sort of like ideological difference about how this was all supposed to go. Mary disagreed, and when he says disagreed, that makes it sound like they were just like debating. But probably when he says disagreed, what he means is like she was about to take the kids and go hide and do something maybe dramatic herself to like out them. And evidently Ethan's son, what's his name? He kills his own wife because he loses. Oh, he's Liam. Okay. Because it says, I avenged them when I killed your master's precious Liam. Oh, he's talking to the audience now. I get it. So, McIntyre's the master and his precious Liam is his son. I gotcha. Okay. So, he kills his wife and accidentally also kills his own children, is the way he's making this sound. And McIntyre is behaving as if, and maybe believes, Aftermath is the one who killed the entire family, when actually his own son killed 3 out of 4. And Aftermath just showed up and killed the son. And from what he says later, it makes it sound like he was in love with Mary. She deserved better than your arrogant bastard of a child. She deserved better than you or yours gave her, just as this child deserves better. He gave Lilly's shoulders a squeeze for emphasis and let his voice fall to an intense whisper. Your team deserves better too. Do they know that you allowed the coordinates of the Dunlevy to be leaked, or have you managed to keep that from them so far? And this is when I was like, oh shit. Because honestly, even the first part with his son and all of this, I straight up believe Aftermath's version of the story. I just do. There's a vibe that he is like telling the fucking truth, and this is a real bee in his bonnet that's been there for a minute, and he has been wanting to throw it in the guy's face for a while. So for me, that is truth. But when McIntyre responds with "you're lying," I can also accept McIntyre does not believe it. He doesn't think that's what happened. The whole thing that's sort of tricky here, it could be that he really believes, or it could be that he knows the truth and he just doesn't want anybody to basically think ill of his son. That he would rather blame it all on Aftermath because it's going to hurt his own reputation if people find out what really went on. But the energy that I get from McIntyre because of his pure rage, I really think he believes Aftermath killed his son. At the same time, the thing that can happen here is that Aftermath telling the truth about what actually happened hits a little bit close, and he realizes that it's actually distinctly possible. And that's what's making him enraged. You know, it's like, there's so much that could be going on there. Nothing gets people angry like realizing they might be wrong. It's just a thing. it just, if there's like, you would think the result would be embarrassment. It rarely is. Embarrassment might be the initial, like, momentary, it immediately turns into anger. It's just like almost right away. So this whole thing, like I said, ends with him being like, so you better take these coordinates and send somebody to talk to me, namely Jordan, or this girl's gonna die. And Jordan, meanwhile, she's been watching this whole exchange and being very careful to not show her emotional reaction to anything, because she knows that, you know, Quaid has been trained the same way she has, and he's going to read that, and he might be able to manipulate her using what he knows is working. But there is a micro reaction on Ethan's face when Quaid accuses him of leaking the coordinates, and she's like, wow, he definitely did that shit. And she can see from Douglas's face that Douglas also knows that McIntyre definitely did that shit. So the call ends, and McIntyre is like, okay, new plan. We don't go save her. And everybody is like, what? And he basically says, this dude loves traps. He loves toying with us. He loves setting us up. This is a fucking obvious trap. We can't sacrifice our entire team walking into an obvious fucking trap for this one girl. And here's the thing. That may seem logical. But McIntyre, you're not stopping to really think about what the trap actually could be here. As soon as Quaid says, did you let them know you leaked the coordinates? McIntyre starts to do the, you're not going to divide and conquer. They're not going to believe your lies, even though he's clearly the one lying. But what he's saying is, I know that you're trying to like drive a wedge between my authority and the people working under me, and you aren't going to. Why has it not occurred to you, McIntyre, that Quaid knows you aren't going to let them rescue this girl, and that's going to be the thing that drives them away from you? Because he already planted the seed of you being untrustworthy by saying this thing about the coordinates. You may think nobody's buying it, but you did give yourself away. And even if they didn't totally buy it, your attitude now is going to fuel any suspicion they might have already had and might have been trying to sort of like sweep to the side and ignore. Your decision to not let them go rescue her is already bad enough. But then you fire Jordan. Dude. If I am correct, I think you walked right into the trap, actually. I think you did precisely what this guy was wanting you to do. And that's the only reason that I wonder whether Lillly is really dead. Because, in my opinion, Quaid wanted exactly what happened to happen. I don't think he really expected them to come. I think he just wanted to set McIntyre up, let them all know who they're actually working for, and he can hold on to Lillly and perhaps use her, or maybe Lillly wasn't as drugged as it seemed like she was, and she finds out that they chose not to rescue her and really begins to rethink who she's working for too. There is nothing like getting somebody to change their allegiance, like showing them that the person they're putting it all on the line for every day could not give fewer shits about whether they live or die. And Lillly is a fucking hell of a weapon. I mean, I wouldn't just kill her if I were in his shoes. He was so delighted with how powerful she was. There's nothing to be gained by just letting her die. I just don't see it. That's, you know, I don't know if this would actually work on her to get her to completely like turn a corner and change allegiance, That's a dramatic thing, especially when you're working with military. They manage to really like drill shit into your head and brainwash you in a way that I don't know I'll ever appreciate as a civilian. But, you know, McIntyre, like, having set everybody up with the Dunleavy from the beginning, her finding that out and then him not wanting to come rescue her, I feel like maybe that could do it, or it could at least wear her down significantly. So this is my going theory. I don't think Lilly's dead. I think McIntyre completely fell for the trap. And now that Jordan is off the leash, I don't know what goes on, because Ryan is working with them all, using her abilities in a way that I actually thought was going to save the day. They keep the coordinates that Jordan is supposed to go to secret. And I was like, oh, no problem. Ryan will get them. Not so. Apparently they've got like pretty great encryption, and she isn't able to crack it in any amount of time that would be helpful, because they only have this half hour. And then when Jordan gets into the cockpit of the plane that she's going to take, all of it has been remotely shut down. And even when Ryan is able to like get the engine started, or like the control panel lit up or something, everything else that actually runs it is still offline or needs to be restarted. So Jordan is sitting there with no options. She doesn't know what to do. And she gets the call from Ethan and she starts recording it. I don't know what it was that she was hoping to have him do here, because in the end, it says like that she feels the weight of her failure. I'm trying to find this moment here. Jordan, you're removed from field command immediately. Tristan will be there by tomorrow afternoon to take over. When you get back, we'll be discussing your future with the program. McIntyre out. The weight of failure settled on Jordan's shoulders like a mountain. She had tried to get McIntyre to relent using emotional triggers, but there was no reasoning with him. Aftermath's statement about killing his son killing McIntyre's daughter-in-law had shaken the man, and Jordan wondered if he was even in his right mind anymore. And so this like bit where she was saying she had hoped to get him to relent, I was not really sure why she would be recording, if she was just trying to get him to like rethink what he had put into motion. I thought she was going to like ask him about the Dunleavy and record his response in the hope that he would somehow like incriminate himself, or, you know what I mean? But that doesn't even come up at all. So I'm not entirely certain what she was trying to do there. I definitely understand her like trying to poke at his trigger points. And I think that was probably like the best option she had. It didn't work, but I think it probably is what she's saying. When she says like, I wonder if he's even in his right mind, I'm like, that's a fair question, because it really seems like he is not hearing anything. And I don't know. I just really wonder what happened with his son. And I want to like be able to sit down and have a real talk with Aftermath, because again, the man is a maniac. Like, he does the whole thing with, we need to be gods, Ethan. And I'm just like, ugh, no wonder you and Spears get along. Although they don't really get along. So, you know what though? If both of you want to be gods, you wouldn't get along, would you? Like, you would work together, but then you would each be definitely planning to like completely backstab the other. I guess that makes sense. Okay, question here. I don't know. Heather, what can Spears do? What I mean is, like, he's out here planning to awaken an entire planet of people for his personal use as an army. Why does he think that he can control like 8 billion awakened beings? Does he have any personal abilities that would allow him to do that? We know that he's got like these amazing technological capabilities. but that feels very separate from like him personally. Can he fly? We know that people used to worship him. So I've been sort of like weirdly just inserting powers. Like he could fly or, you know, do things that triggered like bright light and make them think that he was the sun god because I guess he was Apollo or whatever. And now I'm realizing we haven't actually seen him do any of that. So I don't know what he's actually capable of. And if he's relying solely on brainwashing and conditioning, I am not certain that's going to go the way he thinks it's going to go. Heather says, I'm afraid I can't answer that without spoiling. Well, fine. Because, yeah, I mean, I just don't... If we've got these two dudes, and we've got one who's like, you're all my personal army. And we've got this other dude who's like, we should be seen as gods. They have to break form with one another sooner rather than later. Because those two things can't go together. We can't have everybody's awakened and we're gods. You're not a god unless there are people who worship you because they can't do what you do. So everybody being awakened is in direct conflict with what Aftermath wants. So they gotta come to a point soon where they begin to break apart, I would think. I feel like maybe it's only sustained this long, their partnership, because Spears had not cracked the code yet. And maybe he's hoping that he can keep Aftermath on his side long enough to awaken folks who are indebted to him and thus loyal to Aftermath, and Aftermath will feel like, all right, we're building the like pantheon, but we won't do it for everyone. Maybe he's just sort of underestimating how far Spears intends to go with it. Or maybe Spears has told him, like, you get to pick who gets awakened. Like, I genuinely want to know what that looks like between the two of them. I don't know. It's just weird because, like, they're working together, but they also don't feel like they are at all. Because they're not they don't like each other. They each think they're using the other. And I want to be more inside of Aftermath's head and see what he's thinking there. All right. Well, I had better go. I'm over time, as usual. But thank you very much to Heather for commissioning this. I'm very interested to see what happens. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.